welcome back to another episode of Teach MA Dude, where I give you some perspective on what it is like to teach, coming to you from a real Massachusetts teacher. So you get that real background, that real perspective straight from the front lines. Today's episode is going to be talking about the teacher shortage. Why does it persist? Will it ever end? My take. All right, so this is such a huge thing that's going on. So if you look throughout Massachusetts, you're going to notice that they are struggling to get positions filled. Now, of course, no one is going to tell you this. They're going to obviously never advertise that they don't have the teachers they need to fill the positions that need to be filled. But that is the case. There are folks throughout the Commonwealth of Massachusetts who are either having too big of classes, who are having their classes covered by subs who don't really do anything, and who are just genuinely just being cheated out of an education because they just don't have a teacher. And that is because, leaders will throw up their hands and say, well, there's a shortage. All right, so you got to ask yourself, why is there a shortage? So, this channel was not around prior to the pandemic when it really set in. I wish it was, because back in the beginning of the 2020-2021 school year, so the first year when the pandemic was really upon us, I made a prediction. My prediction was that there was going to be a big exodus of teachers from the profession. Now, this was, of course, ahead of when the Great Resignation, the idea that the Great Resignation, where a lot of people were up and leaving their jobs, but teaching was no exception to that. Okay? Now, I did make another video, why teachers quit. I believe I put that up on my YouTube. So if you haven't seen that, I encourage you to see why teachers quit. Why do they feel like they can't handle the profession anymore? And why do they feel unsupported? That's a whole different idea. That's what is having teachers who are already in it leave it. This is kind of like, why don't teachers want to join up with it? You got to ask yourself, why is it that this profession, of all the public service professions, is extremely hard hit? And I think it's just, the reality is, I think people realize that it's just not really a tenable environment to work in. Okay? Unfortunately, there's been an erosion of respect for the position. If you look in the media, a lot of what you see is people who are portraying teachers. Like, think about the reports you see. You see either teachers abusing students, you have teachers being accused of indoctrinating students, and again, that could be a whole topic of another video. You have teachers accused of all kinds of things. There's never, if you look at the media, there's very rarely a story of a positive thing happening that teachers did. And it's unfortunate because, right, this is the holiday season. This is when we're all riding that high of like, yes, we finally got to break. But it's unfortunately a thing we got to grapple with, is just the unfortunate perception of teachers. And, this idea that you have these teachers and there are these negligent teachers and there's these bad teachers, and that's why the kids aren't learning. And that is just, unfortunately, once you get to the profession, you realize it's actually not really the reason, and that schools don't succeed. So there's that issue. One, teachers are not always seen as the most, highly held profession, unfortunately, in society, despite the level of education they need to get where they're at, despite what they put in on a day-to-day basis. I think, on that note, I think that the reality is, especially with so many opportunities for folks with a bachelor's degree, I think the perception from the outside has increasingly become there's frankly no work-life balance in the job, right? This is true. Anyone coming into the job will know that you're not going to have a work-life balance. And I think if you think about the current generation of folks who are coming in, who are coming up, right? We're thinking about the folks in their 20s, maybe early 20s, mid 20s, right? People typically don't tend to dive in their 40s, 50s to this career. Um, right? These are folks who, in this generation, they are not they want that work life balance, which they rightfully deserve. And I'm sorry, you're just not going to get that as a new teacher necessarily in the way society is, right? In the words of one of my principals, former principals, teachers in the 21st century need to be prepared to take work home. That was a literal quote from a principal that I've heard in the past 5 years. Now, let me ask you a question. If you're going to offer someone a salary of 50 to 60K a year, and they know that they could go and work for making 90, 100 plus K a year, no work to take home, what do you think they're going to do? Right? People don't want to take work home. That's just a reality. People want to have a life outside of work. All right? And so on that note, there's this whole idea of people, another perception of people want to feel that they're going to get something out of what they put in. And again, my feeling is that that is not what they perceive teaching to be. Right? Again, the perception of teaching is you have now, because of the pandemic, this onslaught of students with very significant needs. You have that matched with a culture of not holding students to the high standards that they could be being held to. And you have teachers who are caught in the middle. No one wants to go into a job where day after day they're going to be caught in the middle of that. You can throw all the summer vacation you want at me. You can throw all the breaks here and there you want at me. It doesn't matter. First of all, summer vacation's unpaid. I don't get paid any extra money. Right? The only reason I have money is because I get paid less during the other parts of the year. So, but either way, right? Think about what you're asking teachers to take on in terms of their mental health. Why would someone walk into that? So ultimately, I think what this comes down to is this, and I'm going to try to keep this one shorter. If you don't want there to be a teacher shortage, if you don't want to keep blowing thousands of dollars on School Spring, on these nonsense headhunter agencies who try to find you employees, we won't even name them. Why don't you create a culture? Why don't you create an environment where people actually want to work, right? Think about it. Again, we have a profession where individuals are literally given free master's degrees, essentially free bachelor's degrees, just to get them in the door. Right now, depending on when you applied, you barely even have to have certification if you're working on a COVID emergency license, which you can easily just convert. As long as you basically have a bachelor's degree in anything, you can step into a classroom right now. The standard's not that high. And yet, people still don't want to do it. There's still a shortage. What that should tell you is you need to create an environment where people want to work there. And you need to find a way to strike the balance of serving the students with making the teachers want to get up and come to work every day. Now, how do we solve that? That is something that it's tough to address in one video. But I think we have to start with taking a look again at the culture of the school. What are we asking students to do? And how are we responding to what teachers bring to the table and to how students respond to that? Do we have a culture where students are allowed to say, I'm good, I don't want to do this, I don't feel like doing this? Are we having a culture where that's something that we're going to say is acceptable? Are we going to have a culture where we say, it doesn't really matter when kids turn in their homework, we're going to take it whenever? Right? It doesn't matter what effort teachers put in to make that homework valuable to their curriculum. It doesn't matter what teachers did to have everything tie together and to really push students to think in a new way. It doesn't matter, right? What matters is the grade at the end. Well, if that's the culture you want to have, where you're focused on getting your graduation rates looking good, then all right. If that's how you want to lead the school, ultimately that's your choice. But the reality is, you're not going to have teachers who want to stay around. And here's what I would say to you, if this is you and you're a leader. More and more, I hear two things from older folks, veterans, and retirees. One, I'm glad I got out when I did. Here's a few things. Two, I can't wait to get out. And three, I would never teach in today's schools. These are veterans. I've heard this from veterans of, who've been in the game 20 years plus. I've heard this from people who've been in the 30 years plus. All right, education has clearly changed. It has not changed in America for the better. It is clear that if you look at any objective measurement of our progress, it has not improved. Unfortunately, despite the fact that we keep trying to come up with ideas en masse, none of these ideas work. And I think that none of these ideas are going to work until we fundamentally revisit the culture and have higher expectations of students in the classroom, that in terms of their work, in terms of the behavior, and really hold them to a higher standard. And I think if you don't do that, you're not going to have teachers who are going to want to show up. And the teachers who do want to show up are not going to be that qualified to teach the students, because the qualified teachers are going to go elsewhere. They're going to go into private sector. Textbook companies are poaching them all the time. Right? There's a cottage industry in getting teachers out of teaching. Why do you think that is? Folks like teacher, and I'm going to shout them out. God bless them. Folks like Teacher Career Coach. All right, Daphne over at they would not exist if teaching was a great career to be in and it gave teachers what they needed. Right? I don't even think Daphne wanted to leave teaching. I think if teaching was a career that allowed professionals to have a balance, to feel like they made a difference and have a sense of mental health, none of that would exist. Maybe for the better, maybe for the worse. I think they do great stuff over there, and I support them completely. But it's terrible that we're trying to get all these teachers out of teaching and have this shortage, when if we just made teaching a better environment for the professionals who work there, you wouldn't have that to begin with. All right, it's leading to a vicious, vicious cycle. That's not good for anyone. It's not good for the institutions. It's not good for the students. And it's not good for the folks who remain. So look, I obviously don't want to have, this is the holidays. I want to close things on a positive note. And that's that I think that leaders do have the capacity to make things better. I think teachers do have the capacity to make things better. And I think that when we come together, I think the biggest thing that teachers have to do is they have to come together and not look at the difficult times as an opportunity to fight amongst one another. Because I think when teachers are divided against each other, that is when the institutions really can take advantage of that, and they can really end up doing things that are not to the benefit of the teachers. So there is so much real potential for those who stay in the game if they really do want to change it, and I'm hopeful one day that things will continue to push in a positive direction. But yes, this has been Teach MA Dude, kind of breaking down what my thoughts are behind the teacher shortage. Why is it going on? Why is it persisting? What can people do at a leadership level? Unfortunately, I'm just a teacher. I don't have all the answers, and I'm trying to keep it to a short video. You know, again, a breakdown of this would be like, we could talk about this for hours, and hopefully, you know, I'll have some time to break down my thoughts. But again, thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this to be insightful. I hope you found that this has kind of shared some perspective. Feel free to leave a like, subscribe, comment to keep the conversation going, and I will see you next time.